Y'all want to milk some cows, produce some dairy, and get it delivered out somewhere? Well, you want to be a dairyman. All right, welcome to Dairyman. You're going to be making some milk, people. All right, this is from TMG Games. It plays 2 to 4 players, approximately 20 to 30 minutes, and it recommends 14 and up. Although I have the mindset of an 8-year-old and I can fairly play this, so use the discretion based upon your youngsters who may or may not be able to play a game of this magnitude, which is, in my opinion, not too hard. Okay, so in Dairyman, you're trying to produce milk. Let me introduce you to all the components first. Okay, so you're going to have all these different milk tiles, and then you're going to have the barn tiles, which are 3 of those. You're going to have these back order tokens. You're going to have these freeze tokens, and then you're going to have these dice. And these dice here are, all of them are white except for 1 yellow, and then you have the 4 red. Those 4 red represent back order tokens. I'll explain those in just a second. And this yellow one can be used for special powers to help turn some of your milk into cheese products, which are yummy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up like a little quick 2-player game sort of, and I like to open up the box and let's see which side I'll use. I'll use this side just for the rolling, so that way we can see what's going on. Okay, to set up a game, if you the first thing you want to do is look at the backorder tokens, and you're going to say, hey, in a 4-player game, you're going to use all these. And for every 1 less player in a 3-player game, you'll use 4. In a 2-player game, you use 3. So I'll just throw these back in the box. And for there's so many of these, you really don't need, I felt at least so far that you don't need that many freeze tokens, but you can always reach back in the box if you need them. And then technically how it's going to work out, you're only going to probably use 1 of those red dice, because nobody's going to ever have more than 1 backorder token in a 2-player game. So this is the dice you'll have, and I'm going to use this as my little dice box to roll in, the other part of the box, which makes sense. Okay, so your 3 barn tiles here are basically your 3 roll phases that you can try to do. Now other things try to make your score to make your milk. Now if you look at the bottom of each one, they're all the same except for number 3. And it says with a combination of 2 or 3 dice, you have to make 10. And that locks it in on your first turn. Now let me kind of show you how this works. We're going to set up 3 milk tokens, dairy tokens I guess they're called, and they're worth different. They're anywhere from 10 to 40 points, and there's usually 2 different kinds of each type, and they have different powers on the top right here, and I'll show how they work in a moment. So what we're going to do is, on your turn, you're going to roll all your dice. Not this one, that'll go over there. Nobody's got a back order token yet. So you'll roll your dice, and then you look for sets of 10. So using 2 or 3 dice, you can make a set of 10. So those are really my only 2 possibilities right now, 6 and a 4 and a 4 and a 3-3. But it's better to use the least dice as possible. So what you can do is you can say, I'm going to lock this in, because for every 10 pips or every 10 that you have, if you stop and don't bust, you can purchase as many tiles as equal to the numbers that you have up there. So I'm still in my first turn. So what happens is I can choose to go ahead, like I could right now take this 4-3-3, which makes 10, and lock it in and go, you know what? I'm not going to roll anymore. And I could actually collect this 20-point thing to my side, and then you would replenish up here. Or I could just take this 10 one if I'd rather have that. But let's say I had 30. Let's say my dice had came up for some reason, came up 10 like that. Well, I could go, hey, I'm locking all 3 of those in. That's 30, and I can either take the 30, the 20, and the 10, either combination thereof. But what generally happens is you're trying to make it a little further, or you can like push your luck. You can push your luck right here and say, I'm going to roll these 3 dice and try to get 10, and I didn't. I only got 11, so I would bust, and I wouldn't be able to buy anything with those that are locked in. And pushing your luck means you went to this new area to do a new reroll, a brand new with all whatever dice you have not locked in. Let's say we stopped at 10 on our first one. Well, then we pick up all these dice. Now we're at barn 2. And so I'll roll all the dice here. Okay, so I got some I got some possibilities here. I got a 5, 3, and a 2. So actually I've done pretty well. If I wanted to, I'm definitely locking those in. And if I wanted to, I could do the 5, 3, 2. Now there is, see, 4. If I could get 40, I could get the 30 and the 10, which is really hard though. I could do this for 30, and then of course that wouldn't leave me enough dice, and I'd be able to collect the 30 or the 20 and the 10. But if I wanted to, I could lock that in and go, you know what? I'm going to re-roll to try to go to this one. And you're like, why would you go to barn 3? And this actually has a 3+ on it. So what that means is anytime that you roll here, like you start your turn off rolling with a brand new, not like special powers reroll, but at the beginning, like, oh, this is barn 3 or 4 or whatever, you will collect a freeze token just for going here. So I am taking a risk. I could come up with a combination that would bust and I wouldn't get anything, but just by going here, I'm going to get a freeze token for me. And that lets you trigger abilities, as you can see on the milk when you purchase them right there. So I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to roll all these and see if I can come up with something. And I did. I got a 6 and a 4. So I'm going to spin the 6 and 4. So I got 10, 20, 30, and I'm not going to take a chance to roll this again. Even though if I did roll this again and I busted, I would get a freeze. Like, let's just assume I did roll it again. Okay, I rolled a 4 and a 1. That's garbage. But I would still get a freeze token for rolling there. But I wouldn't be able to buy anything because I busted. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep this. So I'm actually going to pick up this 20 and 10 tile right there for me. And now I have a freeze token. If I want to, I can use this freeze token. Doesn't really matter because my turn is over because I'm purchasing. But it'll flip this over. And all these dairy products will flip over to something. This will flip over to ice cream. And what it says on the bottom of this is that I may, during one of my barn actions, is use this tile to re-roll all 2s. And they all have different, little abilities. Like this one here, if you used it with the 30 pointer, it says that you can choose any one die and re-roll. And as far as I understand by all the rules, you can use them once at each barn roll. And if you start a new roll, like a new barn, like a barn 4, then you would be able to use that ability, each one ability once again. So anyway, those are mine. I got my freeze token, which I did use. So I still have 20 points because that's worth 10 points at the end of the game. This is worth 20 points, and now I have a special power. Okay, so now we replenish this, and this becomes the other player's turn. Now we have, wow, we got some stuff out there. And then we pass the dice to them, and they'll roll. So player 2, which I'm going to call Bob. All right, Bob's got a 10. Bob's got a, oh, I just messed up that. That's a 1. Let's see, I could do a 4, 5, and 1. Let's say Bob goes ahead and says, I'm going to stack all these up there. Bob's a risk taker. Now he's going to go to the new barn because that doesn't have a 10. He's going to roll. And he got a 6, 3. So he busted. Now what happens when you bust is you don't get to buy anything. He could have purchased something and stopped rolling, but Bob was a risk taker. But he's going to take one of these backorder tokens. Now, that's if you have any of these at the end of the game, they're worth -5 points apiece. However, with Bob, it's not such a bad thing early in the game because that means on his turn, he'll be able to roll. If you have one of these, for each one of these, you're going to roll an extra die. So this is going to help him out a little bit. Now, you say, well, why did they do that? Well, the other person can take the risk too, or Bob could try to take 2 of them. Well, here's the thing. Let's say Bob gets real behind in the game and he ends up taking 2 of these tokens. So he's rolling 2 red dice. I guess, see, I was wrong. I guess you could use a second red dice. And then if this third one's ever purchased, now you'll see Bob never intentionally try to bust, because what happens is if whoever busts with this, like once the third one's taken, and immediately at the end of that turn, which it will be that turn because they were unable to produce milk, they will have to, all these will be returned to the main supply, which is good. There's no more negative points. But unfortunately, if Bob had any tokens, let's say he had these out there, he would have to return the highest milk token that he had, and this one's worth 30, so he'd have to return that basically to the bottom of the pile. I think they shuffle them all together and then they get returned. So he's losing stuff because of that back order. He was unable maybe to even to deliver it if you look at it thematically. But an interesting thing is also if you convert these over, the yellow ones, you can lock a die in. So like let's say like my guy here, let's say okay, he busted, he's got one of these, he didn't pick up anything, back to my original turn. So he busted, he got a back order token, poor Bob, but now it's my turn again. So let's say I roll right here. If I can get a 3, there's different numbers, and with specifically the yellow die, which I did, which is excellent, I can go ahead and lock that in here. And what happens is I can't use this anymore for rerolls or anything, so I can go like, oh, I'll put 10 here. I could put a 10 there, but let's go ahead and push it a little bit. And 4, 3, 3 is 10. So I'm going to just lock that down. Even though I can't buy a 20 pointer, I'm not going to take a risk. So I'll add this over here, but I will be able to use this 3 and flip this over. Now cheese products will be 5 points more than their front side. So when you add up the score at the end of the game, you'll look at all the tops of your tiles. So like right now, this would be worth 10, 30, 45 points total. And you play until you can no longer replenish this. The last little note I want to make about the backorder tokens is, let's say, I had, let's see, okay, like when, let's say this person had both of the back order tokens, or ends up even busting taking 3. So whoever had the most, which is me, I would have to get rid of my milk here, right? Well, you say, well, it's the highest point one, right? That's what you're supposed to. But if it's been converted to ice cream or to cheese, you don't have to get rid of it, because somehow we stuck that into either deep storage or something. So these do not spoil as readily as the dairy does. So even though that is kind of a dairy, but the rule is once it's been converted, so I'd only have to lose the highest dairy point. So I would not lose my 20 or 15. In this case, I'd be losing my lowest tile just because it worked out that way. But if I had a 20 and a 10, I'd have to get rid of the 20. But oh yeah, another thing that you can use the freeze tokens for is if you have one of these, you can lock a dice in. So like if you're rolling, and let's say you're pushing your luck and you've got, you know, let me just go ahead and give an example of how you can use a freeze token here. Okay, so let me move these up here so you can see the dice better. And I know that was already there, but okay, so here's a 10 on my turn. And let's say, oh man, I really want to try to get that 40, but you know, sometimes higher numbers are hard to roll. You can take your die and put it on top of your freeze token. And once your turn is over, then you'll lose the freeze token underneath there. But that 6 is locked in from an X roll. So I'm going to save this to go to barn 2 now, but I'll roll all these. Now that 6 is considered a part of this. Okay, so that's gone now. And let me think. There's a 10 there. And, you know, why not? Let's just push our luck. We'll just count that. 6 to 4 is 10. And we'll take one more. I'm going to really push my luck, try to get that 40 token, although I'd probably just take the 30 because I'm not that big of a risk taker. And, oh, 6-4. All right. So that gets locked in. And since I've actually rolled twice on here, I'm going to, every time that I start a roll, I will get one of those freeze tokens, and you can use those immediately. So this is actually was pretty lucky. So I would also get this 40 pointer, and it'll get replenished over here. All right, so that's the long and the short of it. Like I said, the game ends when you can no longer fill your milk tiles up. So like if there, you know, if there's 2 spots that you needed to fill up and there's only 1 token left, boom, you can't fill that up, game ends. All right, you add up the most points, and whoever has the most points wins the game.